What is going on, Wolfpack Nation? Welcome to a special episode of Tuffy Talk. And I do feel that every single episode of Tuffy Talk is special, no doubt about it. But this one to me is a little bit more special, especially for my NC State grads, fellow NC State alumni out there, or honorary alumni as well. Shout out to you, Greg, there as well.
Yep.
Having the NC State alumni famous historian Tim PEELER, who was best known as an author, NC State writer and editor, specializing in university and athletics history at NC State. He's also a non-voting member of the NC State Athletic Hall of Fame, voting member of the NC Sports Hall of Fame, and he also has selected works and books at Tim PEELER, PEELER.blogspot.com. So, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. So excited to have you on the show, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you having me. You guys have a strong and proficient appreciation of NC State athletics and the university, and I among all people, appreciate people who have that. So I was happy to join you guys and reach out to you a couple of times in the past.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I mean that's the thing for us is, I mean, at the end of the day, we're just NC State fans. You know, we're not in-state media. We're just fans and alumni slash honorary alumni as well. That's gonna be a thing, Greg. Which I'm like, all right, Greg, you're an alumni. I don't care. Like, yes, you don't have the piece of paper, but dude, like, you have it. But anyway, so jumping right into it, Tim. So I mean, it's always funny, because I feel like that whenever some of these events take place, that your tweets always kind of, I guess, kind of set the ground flat, being like they're like you're just giving it to us straight, like factual. There is no opinion. Like, this guy's the best. This guy's the best. This is what happened. Like, you basically just said it all straight. So first of all, obviously, I'm going to take a huge shot out there and say that you're an alumni. And which by shaking the head, yes. Okay, good. So when did your love for NC State take such a foot that you became a full historian of, and follower of NC State history?
So my background with NC State is I grew up in North Carolina, western part of the state. My formative years were watching David Thompson, Tommy Burleson, Monty Tao play basketball when I was a 9-year-old kid in Lincoln County, which is adjacent to Cleveland County, where David grew up. He was coached by, as far as I know, a non-relative named Ed PEELER, but as a 9-year-old kid, you hear somebody was the coach of David Thompson. He had the same last name as, excuse me, as you did. You take notice of it. And then, like every other human being on the planet, I took notice of what David did and Tommy did. And my sister grew up as a huge Monty Tao fan, like all teenage girls at that time. And so when I had the opportunity to go to NC State in the 1980s, I entered in the fall of 1983, pretty good year to be on campus, even though I missed the big events of the spring. I was born 1 year too late for that. But so I developed, I will say that I've never been what you would call a fan of NC State athletics, because I've always tried to be an objective observer of NC State athletics. That started when I was a student working for a technician and learning the tenets and basics of journalism, whereas I never really had the opportunity, because I knew I wanted to be a writer, not necessarily a sports writer, but a writer with an objective viewpoint. And I've tried to carry that all the way through. As you mentioned, I try, the thing that I try to bring to the conversation that I don't think everybody has is a perspective about just about anything and everything to do with NC State University, NC State athletics. Try to put things into some sort of, perspective is the best word for me, and to bring out and bring to light things that people may not know, how NC State is connected to certain things, how NC State has played a role in developing the game of college basketball, its impact on football and all other sports, and the university as a whole, with its background in education or engineering, agricultural education, and the things that it does for the people of North Carolina. all of those things are what I've always tried to do in putting NC State in a place in history that it is meant to be, as it's as it was founded to be.
Yeah. Well, one thing it does for the people of the state of North Carolina is make some ridiculously good ice cream. That's one thing it does for sure. But so I do want to ask, because as I was reading it, one question that popped into my head. So what does that mean, non-voting member of the NC State Hall of Fame? What does that mean?
So when the Hall of Fame was founded in 2012, Debbie Yao was very much focused on creating a Hall of Fame. I was a voting member on the selection and election committee, and because of the bylaws that were instituted when it was founded, I was a voting member and an advisor to the voting committee about people and where they fit into NC State athletics history. And because of rotation, I am still a advisor and perspective voice in the room, but I don't vote on the on the class as it goes in. We just had a recent class. I participated in that vote. I happened to be in the Czech Republic at the time, but I still was there to advise and at least give some information as I knew it for the people who were voting on the new class.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need, offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. And go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead. I'll let you finish that. No, I'll go to another topic. I know you
Well,
want to follow up.
the one thing I do want to ask is when the Sports Hall of Fame was created, because this is one thing I was definitely kind of curious about for NC State. Does the amount of people per class get discussed? Because I feel like definitely the amount of people you bring in per year is an important thing, because you obviously don't want to get to a point where you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel per se, being like, well, I guess he's good enough, we'll let him in just that way we can get to the number. Like, how
Right.
like how does all that kind of work?
So the bylaws were created that there would be consecutive classes for the first 3 years every year, with a maximum of 10 athletes, coaches, and contributors. And then it changed to an every other year by bylaw limit of only 7 people per year. Now, some people have deferred. Philip Rivers is one of them. Joan Benoit is another who has deferred because schedules have not allowed them to come and be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. But there is a limit and a number of people who can go in each and every year. Doesn't have to have 7 every year, but it can be up to 7.
Cool.
And then I guess one more follow-up question. Is there like any kind of stipulations? Like, do you have to have graduated? Is there a certain amount of years? Like, we'll use, for the instance, Caitlyn Tu. We all probably pretty much assume that she'll be in the Hall of Fame at some point. Does she have a minimum? What's that now?
I said, we'll talk about her. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But is there, my question is there a minimum number of years you have to wait, kind of like in other like professional sports Hall of Fames, before you're eligible to come up on the ballot?
So there are no minimum requirements for the coaches and contributors, other than they spent their time, did their things at NC State. They can still be active. They don't have to be retired or have gone somewhere else at this point. So there are no restrictions on that. For athletes, you have to be at least 5 years after your career ended, your NC State career ended. There is no requirement for graduation, or there are some clauses about humanitarian. That's not the word I'm looking for, but
doing the right thing.
It's basically a citizenship stipulation in there.
Gotcha.
What the NFL Hall of Fame should have put in already, because it's obvious that it's happening, but it's not in the bylaws. It's obvious it's happening though. So anyway, Go ahead, Ben. Sorry. Yeah. But anyway, Greg, any follow-up questions to that?
No.
Or
I've
yeah.
always been curious to some of that because
Yeah.
you look at some of the athletes and you're like, huh, I wonder why they're not in yet, or why this or that. But that definitely clears up. I didn't realize it was an every other year thing, and then that was really the big one for me. It was every other year.
And do you kind of try to, balance it between, newer generation athletes slash, old school generation athletes as well? Do you kind of try to diversify it, or I mean, does it just work out how it works out?
Well, at this point, there are no stipulations as to, there are no requirements like the College Football Hall of Fame, which is run by an NC State graduate, Gary Stoken, former NC State basketball player. There are stipulations that to be nominated, you have to have been a first team All American. Now, there are people who are never going to be required or never going to make it into the College Football Hall of Fame because no matter how good they weren't a first team All American by I think it has to be two different organizations.
Wow.
There are no specific criteria like that for the NC State Hall of Fame, but it's always up for discussion. It's hard to put on the same level sometimes a volleyball player versus a women's basketball player, where there are multiple ACC championships and All-American status and things like that. But that doesn't mean there aren't people within the program historically of volleyball who don't deserve recognition for what they accomplished here, because there's always a balance of the criteria on a national level for some sports versus the criteria on a localized level for other sports. Doesn't we have the same discussions with the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. How do you put into perspective someone who is a small college All-American in one sport and an Olympic water skiing champion?
Right.
It's hard to
Apples
do that.
to oranges. Yeah.
The accomplishments among your peers and among your sport have to mean something.
Absolutely. That makes sense. So, I mean, we've already mentioned the name, so I'm going to bring it up because I definitely want to discuss it. But, Caitlyn Tu, who, in my opinion, I've said, and I've repeatedly said it on social media, and I chose my word wisely. I didn't want to say the greatest NC State athlete of all time because I didn't want it to sound like that athleticism-wise that she's the greatest. I wanted to seem like the greatest student athlete to ever wear the red and white, in my opinion, is Caitlyn Tu. And I know that's such a hard conversation to have, but I mean, I definitely want to get your viewpoints. Obviously, a lot of people say, well, David Thompson, which I've made the point myself, saying I think that if David Thompson had been allowed to play in 1973, they would have won the national championship, 2-team national championships in college basketball. Yeah, no, he'd be the greatest. But since he doesn't have that, while Caitlyn Tu has 3 times in a row now team national championships, 3
Individual
records, even still to this point, at national NCAA records to this point. Like, I have a hard time saying otherwise, but I want to get your thoughts on it.
I have called her, and I did the story on her last year, and I wrote at the time, I believe she was going to be the most accomplished athlete in NC State history. And I believe after her final year in cross country, that is true. There's no doubt. You can't tangibly say Caitlyn Tu and David Thompson. How do you compare them? It's not fair to either of them because
Absolutely.
David Thompson couldn't accomplish some of the things that she did. She didn't have some of the accomplishments that he did. However, if you look at it objectively, Caitlyn Tu is the most accomplished person, male or female, in NC State athletic history. Now, Julie Shaw may have a beef with that because she won 3 national championships, 3 individual national championships in a span of 36 hours one year.
That's pretty crazy.
She won 7 total. She was an amazing athlete. It was not on the NCAA level because the NCAA at that time did not sponsor and did not govern women's athletics. It was just at the beginning of women's athletics, yet she still did it. She did those things, and you can never take away from what she did, what Betty Springs did, lots of other people have accomplished. But at the level that Caitlyn Tu was at, I still believe she is the. And one of the reasons I say that is because the most important and best race Caitlyn Tu ever ran is one that she did not win. Riley Geiger made this point to me a couple of times. Her finish at this year's cross country championship to get to fifth, which she wasn't at her best, she wasn't feeling well, but she got fifth place. Had she not gotten fifth place, the third national championship wouldn't have happened.
Yep. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Tim. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, in my opinion, you're a very accomplished writer, and you know, written multiple books about NC State, whether it's like about the '83 championship, about the greatest players of all time that have worn the red and white, and then a historical perspective. I guess for me, when researching those books, do you have like any kind of anecdotal stories that didn't make it in the book that are kind of just neat? You know, because like there's all kinds of great stories in there, but you have to have something in the back pocket that didn't make it to print.
So I wrote a chapter in one of my books about. Sorry, guys, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so
I'm right with you. I got halls myself, so.
So this might be the most NC State story I could tell you out of researching the books. I had interviewed Lorenzo Charles multiple times, but I did not have everything that I wanted about Lorenzo Charles. I tried to get him on the phone. My wife had used his livery service a couple of times. She had contact with him. I couldn't get him. And I was getting down to my deadline time. I could not get in touch with Lorenzo. He said, "Yeah, we'll talk." I called him, left him some messages. It just wasn't working out, and I was getting deadline crunch. So one day after football practice, this was when I was still working in newspapers. I excuse me. I just happened to, after practice, go to Char Grill, and I was standing in line in Char Grill waiting for my order. And I had already written it down. I put it in the window. I was standing waiting. And then literally, lo and behold, Lorenzo Charles walks up, puts in his order, and we sit there and talk. And I got everything I needed from him in that point. Things like that happen all the time when you're around Raleigh. And that's one of my favorite stories, though, in researching the books.
That's really cool.
Well, with that being said, Wolfpack Nation, we'll take a quick pause there. As again, we'll pick up in part 2, talking more about NC State history, get to know more and more about the university that we all know and love for sure. So if you haven't already, make sure to go give our friend here, Tim PEELER, a follower. Tim, are you just on Twitter, or are you on any other social media?
Mostly Twitter is where I do stuff that is in regards to NC State and NC State athletics. And that's at Pack Tim PEELER.
Yep, that's right.
Sorry, just at Pack Tim PEELER.
Yep. And then also to Wolfpack Nation, if you want to check out any of his works, his books, go to timpeeler.blogspot.com and go check out all his stuff. Well, with that being said, we'll see y'all for part 2, and go Pack, y'all.